Now, as you may have seen on your smartphone, President Trump has been firing off social media posts, continuing to ramp up the rhetoric over Greenland. There's an image of him on Truth Social planting the US flag there. He's now on his way to meet European leaders at the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. As he boarded Air Force One, he repeated that he has to have Greenland and has threatened America's European allies with 25% tariffs if a deal over the Danish territory can't be done. So how are American politicians reacting to all this, especially as it coincides with the anniversary today of President Trump's first year at the White House? Well, for more on all this, I'm joined now on the line from New York by Arise Special correspondent James Blue. Good to see you, James. I understand there's been reaction in the US Congress in Washington to all this rhetoric over Greenland. Tell us more.
Yeah, Charles, there is a lot of reaction and really a lot of concern that President Trump is moving the U.S. in a direction that is seemingly away from the NATO allies and away from Europe. Both Democrats and Republicans, some of whom were in Denmark and Greenland at the weekend, some of whom are moving over to Davos as well, they basically have been saying to our allies that this is one man's version, this is one man's sort of view, and that this isn't sort of the larger American view. I think a lot of people, certainly in Congress and around the country, are very concerned with the sort of the tone and the rhetoric as it relates to dealing with U.S. allies who served in Afghanistan, who served in Iraq, and who have really been partners. And so there's been a lot of congressional really displeasure from both the minority leader in the House, the head of the Democrats in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, the head of the Democrats in the U.S. Senate, Chuck Schumer, and some Republicans. Lisa Murkowski, who was on the trip to Denmark, has also condemned the president's statements. It just doesn't seem particularly American, and there is concern.
Indeed, I understand the Democrats in particular have been openly criticizing Donald Trump, saying there is no national emergency in Greenland, and Mr. Trump is doing all this under false pretenses. And the concern, as you said, is that this is driving another wedge between the US and its European allies. Because, I mean, threatening tariffs over trade imbalances is one thing, but threatening tariffs because you want to forcibly take over territory from an ally is an entirely different matter, is it not?
It's a completely different matter, Charles, and it's actually unprecedented. I think the other really big issue is the way that President Trump has suggested that force might be necessary. And so you then have the potential of U.S. troops fighting in Greenland, other sort of NATO troops. It just doesn't make sense, and it doesn't really seem particularly germane because the absence of real threat. And so there's a real concern that on this sort of anniversary, President Trump was inaugurated just a year ago, that this is a real indicator of a very different Trump presidency, and that his sort of unilateral view that he and the US deserve and must get Greenland just seems really sort of out of place in the sort of world order that the US has spent many, many years trying to establish. It's very, very concerning.
And you, of course, mentioned there, James, that it is a year ago today that Donald Trump returned to the White House. What are your reflections on his time in office so far?
Yeah, I think this has been a completely different Donald Trump. He came into the presidency quite prepared. He had the Project 2025 playbook and was really ready to sort of execute on many of his sort of large goals. The most important difference, he has with him a team of sycophants and true believers who are completely willing to let him do as he wants. And so previously at this time, there had been one or two chiefs of staff, there had been one or two heads of communications, and there had been a lot of staff turnover. There is much less turnover now. And because Donald Trump will never have to face the US electorate again, there's a real sort of sense of Trump unleashed, and he's just doing things that he wants to get done. Just take what's happened in Washington. They have torn down the east wing of the White House. They have renamed the Kennedy Center the Trump Kennedy Center. They've renamed the U.S. Institute of Peace as the Trump Institute of Peace. And Charles, they're likely to try to put an Arc de Triomphe type statue over in Virginia as you enter Washington by car. And so he's just trying to leave his physical presence, trying to, really gather up power and really believing in this whole belief that the president has ultimate power and he is the one to exercise it. It's a very different place one year on.
And I guess it's worth remembering, James, that Donald Trump won the popular vote. So his return to, was a conscious choice made by a nation that didn't want the Democrats to carry on in power. And of course, looking beyond America, on this anniversary of his second presidency, what is your sense of what his actions have meant for the global order since his return to office? I mean, he's pulled the US out of several UN agencies and international treaties, and he's clearly emboldened, as you mentioned, by a team who fully supports his agenda. And I understand his social media stream includes an AI map in the Oval Office showing Venezuela and all of North America, including Canada and Greenland, covered in the US flag.
Yeah, no, Charles, it is very concerning internationally as well, because we've seen a president who has been much more willing to do things unilaterally. And I think that is the thing that's probably the most concerning. The unilateral declarations as it relates to Greenland, the unilateral efforts with Venezuela, sort of the unilateral efforts to pull the US out of these sort of common bodies that were set up to make sure we never ever have another world war. President Trump suggested that he would be able to bring peace to Ukraine within days of his election. We're still waiting for that. And, there's some sense that President Trump sort of fashions himself a leader in the sort of mold of President Xi in China or Vladimir Putin in Russia. He sort of sees himself as a strong man, sort of able to do whatever he wants. And yes, Charles, you are right. He did win the popular vote and he won the Electoral College. However, the sort of extent of the changes that he's doing, let's just take back to domestic politics, the immigration raids that are going on. Americans are overwhelmingly opposed to that type of action. Yes, they want immigration to be controlled. Yes, they want the borders closed, but they don't want people being pulled out of the school run drop off or pickup lines. That's not what people signed up for. So, yes, he was elected by popular vote, but I don't think the actions that he's doing really have much favor, which is why the Democrats did so well in the elections last November. Finally, the biggest concern with Donald Trump in this present mode is, can the world systems, can they cope and will they last in this wake of his sort of ambition and his selfishness? One last example, the Gaza Peace Council. that he alone is the chairman. He's inviting other countries to join with a payment of $1 billion. And even after he serves as US president, it's not the US president who is the chair, it's Donald J. Trump without any other veto nations. This is unbelievable and a completely new game in international affairs and very, very concerning.
Sounds really concerning and quite extraordinary the way that you put it there, James.